Hey, Richard Bryce here. In this video, I want to help you to develop your attacking high forehand. This was a shot that I used to have nightmares about. It plagued me for most of my younger tennis playing career. It wasn't until I got quite a lot older that I was able to address it. So what I'm going to do in this video is explain some of the key technical features that allowed me to develop it, but also talk about some of the things that limited me and stopped me from improving it and what I had to do to overcome those so that now I can start to crush and enjoy hitting winners off these high forehands. So that's the plan for the video. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, make sure you do that as well. Okay, so the first thing we need to talk about is the stance and the setup with your feet. You're going to be hitting these high forehands from either an open stance or from a semi-open stance or some variation of that. I know sometimes we see some of the best players in the world hitting really high balls from a neutral stance, but that's much harder to do. You want to think about an open or a semi-open stance, so you'll be coming in, setting up, and then hitting through there. Now this is something you want to practice. You just want to get used to the balance, because normally you're going to be moving forwards, so you want to practice going from moving forwards to setting up in that stance, and then going into the shot. Now, it's a good idea to also work on adjustment steps. Sometimes with these high balls, it seems like it might be easy, you seem like you've got time, but you might not be in the perfect position. So it's a good idea to practice being in your open or semi-open stance and just doing little adjustment steps, because sometimes you'll have to go in there and then just do a little adjustment back or a little adjustment forwards. And I was watching the ATP finals a couple of weeks ago, whenever it was, and I saw a fantastic example of this from Djokovic. It was a deep ball, it was a high ball, and he kind of set up in position and he actually moved forwards a little bit and backwards a little bit. So he did two different adjustments, and then he slapped the ball for a winner because he was in the right position. So if Djokovic has to do that sort of stuff, we do as well. So open or semi-open stance, but also work on those adjustment steps in case you need to make adjustments. The next thing that's going to be really important is going to be your spacing. So when you're hitting these high forehands, you need to be a little bit further away. A common mistake that players make is they get too close to the ball. This is something that I actually used to struggle with a lot. For me, it wasn't necessarily the knowledge part, it was that my visual system wasn't functioning well enough, so I wasn't very good at getting far away. But I'll talk about that in a moment. The key thing for you to understand is that if you get too close, it won't work. Like when I hit a low forehand, I can do that from down there. I can do it from that position, that far away from my body. But then up here, it doesn't work. You can't get it to work like that. So even if I'm in that neutral stance to go from there, look how much further my racket is away. So in that open stance or semi-open stance, that racket is quite a distance away from my body in this plane. So you've got to make sure you set up probably further away from the ball than you need to, because you can also move into it. So we talked about the adjustment steps, but if you're a little bit too far away, you can actually, wasn't a very good feed on that one, but if you're a little bit too far away, you can actually launch yourself into it so that you're making up that ground. So I've set up in the wrong position, I'm making up that ground by moving into it, where it's much harder to move away from it. So making sure of the spacing is going to be the next key thing that you've really got to get. Now we need to consider what you're going to be doing with the racket kind of as part of the preparation. So when you hit this higher forehand, your preparation needs to be done in a certain way. I mean, depending how you take your racket back initially, if you do a unit turn generally that's quite low, then it might not work. If the ball's up here, to get from this position to then be able to hit it up there, it's tricky. So you've got to make sure that your racket is going to be at least or roughly at the same level. It can be a little bit below, but generally behind the line of the ball that you're going to be hitting at. So if I'm going to hit the ball at this height, you want to think about making sure that you at least get your racket at that height in line with the ball, because what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and hit through the ball, and the swing path is going to be kind of coming potentially down, but certainly across the body. So if you're there and doing low to high, it's not going to work. You've got to be hitting through the ball, and to do that, you have to prepare in a way that allows you to do it. And then following on from that, your racket lag needs to reflect that as well. So as you do your racket lag, it needs to be more in line with the ball, so then you can create a straighter swing path that goes through the ball and reduces the likelihood that you significantly miss this shot. So as you think about your preparation, obviously you're setting up in that open stance, you're thinking about your distance, but you're making sure that you've got your racket at an appropriate height, and the racket drop is going to be fairly high as well, so it's not going to drop down there like it would for a ball where we're going to really try and hit low to high. And then following on from that, we've got how we create that racket head speed as well. Rotation is going to be really important. It's really important for all forehands, but we're really going to rotate from our body. We're going to drive from this leg, the torso is going to rotate, and we're going to be using rotation to initiate this movement. Arming it is not going to work. It's really tricky to have that forehand and it actually went in. It's really tricky to have that forehand and then arm it and make it a successful shot on a consistent basis. You have to use rotation, so your full kinetic chain where you're rotating from the hips, then the torso, then the shoulder, and then that's going to start the sequence of events. So you're just going to hit through using that rotation, and you've probably seen what's happened to my feet each time. Often I'm kicking up into there and using my leg as a counterbalance, but you might also find that you're doing a full pivot as you hit it, because you're going to be driving through your legs to create this rotation into the ball. So in terms of the swing, that's what we want to be thinking about. Preparing, making sure we've got that preparation a little bit higher, driving through the legs to create the rotation, to initiate the racket drop, but keeping that racket drop a little bit higher through the line of the ball, and then following through, potentially coming down. So it won't be a windshield wiper sort of thing. Sometimes you can even finish a little bit lower if you're really going from high and you're a little bit closer to the net. So that's the next thing that we need to look at. Okay, so the last couple of things I want to mention. Obviously, you want to be keeping your head still through contact. Your job is to watch the ball onto your strings, as always, to increase the likelihood of consistency. But I want to talk about the timing aspect. The timing is going to be crucial. You've got to get the rotation, you've got to meet that ball out in front. Without that, it's not going to work. And that's something I used to struggle with a lot. Part of that was to do with my visual system. I had issues with some of the visual skills involved in judging distance and depth, so that created a big problem for me. Now, if you'd like to learn more about that stuff, I've created a masterclass that's going to teach you about the visual side of things. I'll place the link down in the description, and I'll place a link up there so you can check that one out. It's pretty cool. I'll explain that stuff in detail, and we'll go through a few different assessments to help you figure out if maybe vision is one of the things that's affecting your timing. But even once I'd addressed my visual issues, I still had to make a little bit of a modification on the way that I swung, and that was to reduce the length of my take back. I used to take it back too far, like not in a terrible sense, but just too far for me. It's not that it can't be done. There's plenty of players in the world that can start with their racket in that position and make this work. But I couldn't. Even after I'd sorted my vision out, I had to really abbreviate it and get the racket. So if normally my take back would go to there, I actually reduced it still. So I've basically got the racket just behind the ball. So as I drive through the hips, I'm going racket drop and then into contact point. So I personally found that reducing that made a massive difference in terms of my ability to execute this shot and in terms of my consistency. And what you'll find is, even just going from that short distance, because you're using rotation from your body and you're still creating racket lag, it is still more than enough space to generate power to put these shots away. So don't worry about not being able to hit it hard enough by not doing a big backswing. By abbreviating it, it'll still work. And like I said, this was just something that I had to solve. I've seen a number of top players that also do this, but there are plenty of people out there who have good enough timing to do monster swings and hit it even harder. I'm not one of them. I don't know where you stand, but I just wanted to let you know about it because it could potentially be really important, because I know it was for me. Okay, that's all I've got for you on this one. Like I said, partway through, I've got that masterclass that you might want to check out. The link is down in the description. If not, no worries, concentrate on the other points. So setting up in the open stance, semi-open stance, making sure you're getting the spacing, adjusting the swing, you know, abbreviating things, working on this timing, and hopefully that's going to help you to develop a much better attacking high forehand. If you've got any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. Leave them down below. If not, I will see you next time.